Rancher saves young Apache woman, but tradition demands he marry her. White heavy check mark. His ranch stretched over miles of dry, rugged land, where the sun blazed down relentlessly during the day, and the nights were cold enough to make even the hardiest traveler shiver. John had grown up with this land, learning to ride horses before he could even walk properly, and to care for cattle in all kinds of weather. Life on the ranch was hard, but John found a sense of peace in it, a rhythm that made him feel at home. Every morning he would wake before dawn, check on the cattle, repair fences, and make sure that his small herd was safe. But today, unlike any other, something unusual was about to happen, something that would change his life forever. It had been a dry winter, and the desert had received only a few drops of rain in the past weeks. The creek that usually ran lazily through the edge of his property was almost completely dry, its bed cracked and dusty. Still, John knew that desert rain could come suddenly and violently. He had seen it before, a sudden storm filling dry riverbeds with fast-moving water capable of sweeping anything away. He always kept an eye on the skies, and this afternoon he noticed dark clouds gathering over the horizon. The wind picked up, carrying the sharp scent of rain mixed with the earthy smell of the desert. As John walked along the edge of the creek to check the fences, he heard something that made him freeze in his tracks. At first he thought it was the wind, rustling through the dry grass, but then he heard it again, a sharp, frightened cry. Help! The voice was faint, desperate, and very close. John's heart pounded as he scanned the creek bed, trying to see where the sound was coming from. Then, through a break in the dry brush, he saw her, a young woman struggling in the shallow water of a small pool that had formed from the sudden rain. She was caught in a patch of slippery mud, her legs sinking with every movement, and the water around her feet was beginning to rise quickly. She was small and fragile-looking, and yet she fought with every ounce of strength she had, trying to free herself. But the current was stronger than her, and each attempt only made her sink deeper. John did not hesitate. Without thinking of the danger or the muddy water soaking his boots, he sprinted toward her, calling her name, although he didn't know it yet. Reaching the edge of the creek, John grabbed a long branch and extended it to her. "Grab it!" he shouted, his voice firm but calm. She reached for it, her hands shaking and muddy, and finally, with one last push, John pulled her out of the water. She collapsed onto the bank, coughing and gasping for breath. John knelt beside her, brushing mud from her clothes and making sure she was all right. She was shivering uncontrollably, her teeth chattering, and John immediately realized how close she had come to a serious accident. "Are you hurt?" he asked gently. She shook her head, unable to speak at first, but her eyes were wide with fear and gratitude. John could see the mud streaks on her face and the soaked fabric of her dress, clinging to her small frame. He knew she needed warmth and rest. "Come on," he said, offering his hand. "Let's get you to the house. You're safe now." The walk back to the ranch cabin was slow. John held her hand, steadying her as she struggled to keep her balance. Every step through the muddy, uneven ground was careful, and the air was filled with the sound of the rain beginning to fall in steady, heavy drops. By the time they reached the cabin, both of them were soaked, and the wind had picked up, making the rain sting their faces. John quickly guided her inside, closing the door against the storm. The cabin was small but warm, with a wood stove in the corner that John lit as soon as they entered. He helped her sit by the fire, wrapping a thick blanket around her shoulders. "Drink this," he said, handing her a cup of warm water. She took it gratefully, holding it with both hands as she sipped slowly. Her hands were cold, almost numb, and John could see the exhaustion in her eyes. After a few moments, she finally spoke, her voice soft and hesitant. "Thank you," John smiled, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. "Don't mention it. You were in danger. Anyone would have done the same." She shook her head slightly, as if to say she didn't think anyone else could have helped her. There was a quiet strength in her eyes, even though her body trembled. John felt a strange mix of admiration and protectiveness. As she began to recover, John noticed the marks of her struggle, scratches along her arms and legs, small bruises forming under her clothes. He cleaned and bandaged the wounds as carefully as he could, talking softly to keep her calm. He learned that her name was Ayanna, and that she lived in a nearby Apache community. She did not say much about how she ended up in the creek, only that she had been traveling and had been caught off guard by the sudden rain. John respected her silence, sensing that she trusted him enough to accept help but not yet enough to share her story. Hours passed, and the storm raged outside. Lightning lit up the sky in bright flashes, and the thunder rolled across the desert hills. John and Ayanna sat together in the small cabin, the warmth of the fire drying their clothes and easing their tension. John realized that this moment, the rescue, the quiet conversation, the shared warmth, was something unusual. It was a connection born of circumstance, yet it felt profound, as if fate had brought them together. By nightfall, Ayanna had recovered enough to eat a simple meal of bread and stew. John watched her carefully, noting the way she handled the food with polite manners, the way her eyes reflected both caution and curiosity. He realized that she was not only brave but also intelligent and thoughtful. There was a dignity in the way she carried herself, even in the midst of her exhaustion. John felt an unexpected admiration for her, a recognition that her life had already required strength and courage beyond her years. As the fire burned low, John offered her a place to sleep for the night. She hesitated at first, unsure if it was appropriate, but finally nodded. He led her to a spare room, laying out blankets and making sure she was comfortable. Before leaving, he looked back at her and said softly, "You're safe now. Sleep well." She nodded again, her eyes reflecting gratitude, and for the first time, John felt a mixture of relief and something more complicated, an awareness that this encounter was only the beginning of something significant. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the desert in a rhythm both harsh and gentle. John stood at the cabin door for a moment, listening to the storm and thinking about the day's events. He had saved a life, yes, but he also realized that he had stepped into something much larger than himself. Ayanna was not just a stranger in need. She represented a connection to a world he had always respected but never fully understood. The thought lingered in his mind as he turned back to the fire, feeling both anticipation and uncertainty about what the coming days might bring. By morning, the rain had slowed, leaving the desert sparkling with a fresh glow. John awoke to find Ayanna already awake, sitting quietly by the window and watching the sunrise. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with mutual understanding rather than words. John felt a quiet admiration for her resilience and a deep sense of responsibility for her well-being. He knew that their lives had intersected in a dramatic, almost fateful way, and that the story of the day would mark the beginning of a journey neither of them could have predicted. After the storm had passed and the sun rose over the vast Arizona desert, John Miller felt a strange mix of relief and uncertainty. Ayanna, the young Apache woman he had rescued, was sitting by the window, watching the golden sunlight spread across the dry hills. She looked calm now, but John could still see the traces of exhaustion on her face. He wondered how much she had been through before he found her, and whether the desert had tested her more than she let on. John spent the morning preparing breakfast while Ayanna quietly explored the small cabin. She moved with a cautious grace, touching objects gently and looking at everything with curiosity. The cabin was filled with the scent of cooked eggs, coffee, and fresh bread, but more than that, it carried the warmth of safety, a feeling she had not known in a long time. John noticed how tense she had been yesterday, and he hoped the comfort of the cabin and his care would help her relax. Finally, he handed her a plate of eggs and toast. "Eat, you need strength," he said kindly. She nodded, taking the plate, and began to eat carefully. Her movements were slow, almost deliberate, as if she was still wary of her surroundings. John watched her silently, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Saving someone's life was one thing, but now, he realized, caring for her involved understanding a world far larger and more complicated than his own. After breakfast, Ayanna spoke for the first time about the traditions of her people. She explained that her family was part of a nearby Apache community, a group that valued history, rituals, and respect for customs. In her culture, life was not just about survival, it was about balance, respect, and honor. A man who saves a woman's life, she said quietly, carries not only the act of rescue, but also a responsibility that is deeply connected to tradition. John listened carefully, trying to understand. He had always respected different cultures, but this was something he had never faced before. "You mean because I saved your life, there's an expectation?" he asked, his tone neutral but curious. Ayanna nodded. Her dark eyes were calm but serious. "Yes. It is not just about saving me. In our tradition, the one who saves a life becomes connected to it in a way that cannot be ignored. Sometimes it means marriage. Sometimes it means lifelong responsibility. The elders will decide." John felt a weight settle in his chest. The idea was unexpected, and yet he could see the honesty in her words. She was not asking him to act. She was explaining the reality of her world, a world he had never been part of but could not ignore. John spent the rest of the morning thinking. He walked through his ranch, checking the cattle and repairing fences, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought about the moment he had seen Ayanna struggling in the creek, the fear in her eyes, the mud clinging to her clothes. He remembered pulling her to safety, the sound of her voice as she whispered, "Thank you," and the quiet look she had given him that seemed to hold more meaning than words could express. Saving her had been instinctive, natural, but now he realized that instinct carried consequences far beyond the physical act. By midday, John decided to visit Ayanna's community to understand more. He wanted to show respect for her culture and meet the elders who guided these traditions. He explained his plan to Ayanna, who initially hesitated. "They may be cautious," she said softly. "They may not trust you immediately. But if you go with honesty and respect, they will listen." John nodded, determined to act in good faith. He prepared his horse, packed water and some provisions, and set off with Ayanna walking beside him, supported by his steady presence. The journey to the Apache community was long but not difficult. The landscape shifted from the open desert to rocky hills dotted with desert shrubs and small clusters of trees. The sun was warm, and a gentle breeze carried the smell of earth and grass after the recent rain. Ayanna spoke occasionally, pointing out landmarks and explaining small details about the land and its history. John listened, fascinated. He had known the desert all his life, but seeing it through her eyes gave him a new perspective, a sense of connection to something older and wiser than himself. When they arrived at the Apache village, they were met by a group of elders. Their faces were lined with age and experience, their eyes sharp and observing. John felt a nervous knot in his stomach. He was a man used to solitude and straightforward decisions, but here, he was in a world guided by rules and traditions he could not take lightly. The eldest among them, a woman with gray hair and a calm but commanding presence, stepped forward. "You have saved Ayanna," she said in a voice that was both gentle and firm. "Now, you must understand what that means. Life and honor are connected in ways that outsiders may not see." John bowed his head slightly, showing respect. "I understand," he said simply. "I only acted to save a life, but I want to respect your traditions. I want to do what is right." The elders exchanged glances, nodding slowly. One of them, a man with deep-set eyes, spoke next. "Saving a life creates a bond. That bond carries responsibility. You must decide if you can accept this responsibility fully, without hesitation and with understanding of our ways." John felt the weight of their words. This was more than a question, It was a test of character, of integrity, and of heart. Over the next few hours, John and the elders talked. They explained the significance of saving a life in Apache tradition, the expectations it could bring, and the importance of honor in every action. John listened intently, asking questions and seeking to understand. Yana remained nearby, watching quietly, her expression calm but expectant. She trusted him, he realized, but she also understood the depth of the decision that now faced him. By evening, John felt he had gained some clarity. He respected the traditions deeply and wanted to honor them, but he also felt the need to consider his own values and the future he imagined. He realized that the path ahead would require patience, understanding, and courage, not just physical courage, but moral courage. Saving Ayana had been a simple, instinctive act, but now, respecting the traditions and navigating the expectations required careful thought and honesty. That night, back at the ranch cabin, John and Ayana sat together quietly. The fire in the stove cast warm light across the room. The silence was comfortable, filled with mutual understanding. John thought about the events of the day, the rescue, the visit to the community, and the conversations with the elders. He realized that his life had changed in a way he could not have predicted. He had entered a world of tradition and honor, a world that demanded more than bravery, it demanded wisdom and respect. Xiana finally spoke, her voice soft but steady. "You did not have to come to the village," she said. "But you did. That shows your heart, John. You act with kindness, yes, but also with respect. That matters to us." John looked at her, feeling a connection growing between them, a bond forged by circumstance but strengthened by understanding and care. He knew that whatever decisions lay ahead, they would have to face them together, with honesty and courage. As the night deepened, John gazed out the window at the desert. The stars were bright, scattered across the sky like diamonds. He thought about the future, uncertain, complex, but full of possibility. Saving a life had brought him here, but it was the understanding, the respect, and the connection he now shared with Ayana that made the experience meaningful. He realized that true responsibility was not just about action. It was about understanding, honoring, and caring. By the time he turned away from the window, John felt a quiet resolve forming within him. The challenges ahead would be many, but he would face them with honesty and respect. Xiana, too, had shown courage, patience, and trust. Together, they had begun a journey that went beyond the desert, beyond the ranch, and into a world where tradition and choice intertwined. And though John did not yet know the full path that lay ahead, he knew one thing clearly: he could not turn away. The days that followed John's visit to the Apache community were filled with a quiet tension. On one hand, there was the satisfaction of having acted with respect, of having met the elders and learned about the significance of saving Ayana's life. On the other hand, John felt the weight of expectation pressing upon him, an invisible force he could neither ignore nor fully understand. He knew that the elders had watched him closely, measuring his sincerity, his patience, and his willingness to honor their traditions. The thought of disappointing them, or worse, failing Xiana, was heavy on his heart. Back on the ranch, life went on, but everything had changed. Ayana had grown stronger and more comfortable, yet the quiet awareness of their connection lingered in the air. She moved through the cabin and the ranch with the same grace as before, but there was now a deeper understanding between them. John watched her closely, admiring her resilience and intelligence, while also feeling a profound responsibility toward her. Every task they shared, feeding the cattle, repairing fences, or collecting water from the well, carried an undercurrent of trust and respect. John's family, however, noticed the change immediately. His younger brother, Tom, was the first to speak. "John, what's going on?" he asked one evening, his curiosity impossible to hide. "Who is this girl, and why is she here for so long?" John hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. "I rescued her from the creek," he explained simply. She's from a nearby Apache community. She was in danger and I had to help her. Tom raised his eyebrows. Yeah, but this is serious, John. She's not just visiting, right? There are rules, traditions. What are you getting yourself into? John nodded, knowing his brother was right. This was bigger than anything he had faced before. Over the next few days, John's parents joined the conversation. They were practical people, hardworking and grounded, but they also understood the importance of tradition in their own way. His father spoke first, his voice calm but firm. John, you've always respected people and their ways, but this is different. You're dealing with a whole culture here, with customs that you don't fully know. You need to think carefully about what this could mean for your life and hers. John appreciated the concern, yet he felt that caution alone would not guide him through what lay ahead. He needed understanding, patience, and courage, qualities that could not be measured in advice alone. Meanwhile, Ayanna adjusted to life on the ranch with quiet dignity. She helped John with daily chores, learned the routines of cattle care, and even tried her hand at horseback riding. She adapted quickly, showing a remarkable balance of independence and respect for the ranch. John observed her with admiration, noticing her intelligence and her gentle approach to both animals and people. Yet despite the growing closeness between them, there was an unspoken understanding. They were navigating a delicate path, one that required sensitivity to culture, tradition, and personal choice. One afternoon, John decided to take Ayanna to visit a nearby part of the ranch where the river ran more steadily. He wanted to show her the land he loved, to share a piece of himself while also learning more about her experiences. As they walked along the riverbank, the conversation naturally turned to family and heritage. Ayanna spoke of her people with pride, their history, their values, and the way they honored life and community. John listened carefully, asking questions and offering insights about his own upbringing. It was a quiet, thoughtful exchange, but it strengthened the bond between them, a connection built not on obligation but on mutual understanding. That evening, word came from the Apache community. An elder arrived at the ranch, carrying a calm yet serious expression. John and Ayanna welcomed him, knowing that his visit was important. The elder explained that the community had discussed the situation extensively. They acknowledged John's courage in saving Ayanna and his respect for their customs, but they also reminded him of the responsibilities that came with such an act. A bond has been created, the elder said softly. It is not to be taken lightly. You must understand that actions have consequences and choices carry weight. John nodded, absorbing the gravity of the message. The following days were a mix of preparation, discussion, and reflection. John spent time considering the implications of the bond he had formed with Ayanna. He realized that the decision ahead was not simply about following tradition. It was about understanding the impact on both their lives. Ayanna, too, was aware of the expectations, but she moved with patience, allowing John to make thoughtful decisions rather than pushing him toward any particular path. Their growing friendship became a source of strength, providing a foundation on which they could navigate the complexities of culture, family, and responsibility. As John reflected on the elder's guidance, he began to understand that tradition was not merely a set of rules. It was a reflection of values, history, and respect. The expectations placed upon him were not meant to bind or control, but to honor life and the connections formed through acts of courage. He realized that he could not simply act out of obligation. He had to act with integrity, ensuring that every choice respected both his own values and the traditions of Ayanna's people. This awareness brought clarity, even as it made the path ahead seem more complex and challenging. One evening, John and Ayanna sat together outside the cabin, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted with shades of orange and pink, reflecting on the calm surface of the river nearby. Silence hung between them, comfortable yet full of meaning. John broke the quiet. "Ayana, I want to understand everything. Your culture, your traditions, your expectations. I don't want to make a mistake, and I don't want to disappoint you or your people." Gianna looked at him, her eyes reflecting gratitude and trust. "I know, John, and I believe you are sincere. That matters more than anything." In the days that followed, John continued to engage with both his own family and the Apache elders. He asked questions, sought advice, and reflected deeply on the responsibilities he had undertaken. He learned about ceremonies, customs, and values that had guided Ayana's community for generations. He began to see that the connection formed by saving her life was more than a personal bond. It was a link to a culture that honored courage, compassion, and respect. Each lesson deepened his understanding, while also making the eventual decision, whatever it might be, feel both heavier and more meaningful. John also noticed subtle changes in his own feelings. What had begun as a sense of duty gradually transformed into something more profound. He admired Ayana not just for her bravery in the creek or her grace on the ranch, but for the quiet strength, intelligence, and dignity she carried in every action. Likewise, Ayana observed John's honesty, patience, and courage. They were learning from each other, forming a connection built on mutual respect and understanding rather than mere circumstance. This growing bond gave both of them a sense of hope and possibility, even as the weight of tradition and expectation lingered. The community's elders continued to watch from a distance, observing how John and Ayana interacted, how he respected their guidance, and how she responded to his patience and care. The elders recognized that a connection was forming, not through force or obligation, but through genuine understanding and trust. This observation reinforced the idea that true bonds were not imposed, they were nurtured. John felt a deep sense of responsibility to honor this trust, knowing that the choices he made would affect not only their own lives, but also the broader sense of respect between their communities. By the end of the week, John had reached a new level of clarity. He understood that the path ahead was not a simple one. It involved balancing his own values with the expectations of tradition, navigating family concerns, and honoring Ayana's autonomy. Yet he also knew that he was willing to face these challenges. He had saved her life, yes, but he had also come to care for her as a person, someone with her own thoughts, feelings, and dreams. The bond they shared was real, and it demanded both respect and courage. As night fell over the desert, John and Ayana once again sat outside the cabin, the stars twinkling like distant lanterns across the sky. The air was cool, carrying the scent of earth and grass from the recent rain. John looked at Ayana and felt a quiet determination settle within him. Whatever decisions lay ahead, he would face them with honesty, respect, and care. He realized that true responsibility was not just about following tradition. It was about understanding, compassion, and integrity. Ayana's trust, the elders' guidance, and his own values were all pieces of a puzzle he was determined to solve with thoughtfulness and courage. The days passed quietly at the ranch, yet for John and Ayana, each day held a growing sense of connection and understanding. What had started as a rescue had now evolved into a partnership, one forged through shared labor, conversation, and the slow discovery of one another's personalities. The desert around them, with its wide-open skies and rugged hills, seemed to mirror the freedom and honesty of their growing bond. John had never thought of his life as lonely, yet the companionship of Ayana brought a warmth and vitality he had not realized he had been missing. Each morning, John would rise before the sun, tending to the cattle and the land. Ayana, meanwhile, had begun to assist him more actively, not just with chores but also with observing patterns in the animals and the land that John sometimes overlooked. She had a sharp, intuitive sense, noticing when a cow was unwell or when the weather might change, and John admired her for it. Her presence was no longer that of a guest. It was as if she had become a part of the ranch, quietly threading her energy into its rhythm. One morning, as the sun rose over the horizon, John found Ayanna tending to a small garden he had started near the cabin. The desert soil was dry and stubborn, but she worked patiently, planting seeds and carefully watering each one. John paused for a moment, leaning against the fence, watching her with a mixture of admiration and awe. "You have a real touch with the land," he said quietly. Ayanna looked up, a small smile crossing her face. "It's not so different from caring for people or animals," she replied softly. "Attention, patience, and respect, everything grows better with them." John nodded, realizing that she was teaching him more than he had expected, not just about the land but about life, patience, and connection. Their days were filled with small adventures. Sometimes they rode horses through the hills, racing along dusty trails and laughing when one lost footing or stumbled slightly. Other times they explored the desert, examining the plants, birds, and small animals that inhabited the land. John found himself learning from her stories about the desert from her perspective, how the Apache people had lived in harmony with it for generations, understanding its rhythms and secrets. Ayanna's words painted vivid pictures, bringing history, culture, and a sense of sacredness to the land he had always called home. Yet, amidst the growing friendship, there was an underlying tension. Both John and Ayanna were aware of the expectations of the elders and the traditions that had been discussed. John often thought about the responsibilities that came with saving her life and the bond that now linked them. He knew that the community was observing him, that his actions and intentions were being measured. Likewise, Ayanna carried the quiet weight of her own understanding, the knowledge that tradition could shape her future, and that of John as well. Neither spoke of it often, but the unspoken awareness added depth and gravity to every interaction. One afternoon, as they repaired a section of fence together, Ayanna paused, wiping sweat from her brow. "John," she said, her tone serious but gentle, "do you ever think about what comes next? About the bond the elders spoke of?" John considered her question carefully. He had thought about it constantly, weighing the expectations, his feelings, and the practical realities of life on the ranch. "Yes," he admitted, "every day. I want to do the right thing for you, for your people, and for myself. But I also want to make sure it's something we both choose, not just something expected." Ayanna nodded, appreciating his honesty. "That is why I trust you," she said softly. As their bond deepened, so did their understanding of one another. John began to notice the subtle ways Ayanna expressed herself, her gestures, her tone of voice, the way her eyes reflected emotion. He admired her quiet strength, the balance between independence and respect, courage and humility. Likewise, Ayanna observed John's integrity, patience, and gentle leadership on the ranch. She saw a man who could act decisively when needed, but who also valued thoughtfulness and respect. Slowly, admiration gave way to something more profound, though both of them remained cautious, aware of the cultural and practical implications of their growing closeness. Evenings were their quietest moments, times for reflection and conversation. Sitting by the fire in the cabin, they shared stories of their pasts, childhood memories, lessons learned, and moments that had shaped them into who they were. John spoke of life on the ranch, the lessons from his parents, and the joys and struggles of raising cattle in the harsh desert. Ayanna shared stories of her community, her family, and the traditions that guided her people. These exchanges created a bridge between their worlds, allowing them to understand each other on a level deeper than words alone could convey. One night, under the vast expanse of a star-filled sky, John and Ayanna went out to the riverbank. The water glimmered in the moonlight and a gentle breeze whispered through the trees. They sat quietly, the silence comfortable yet charged with unspoken emotion. John spoke softly, breaking the stillness. "Ayanna, I never expected to meet someone like you." This, everything, it's changed how I see the world. Yana turned to him, her eyes reflecting the starlight. And you have changed mine, she said simply. Not just because you saved me, but because of the way you respect life, people, and even this land. That matters more than words can say. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of life on the ranch became a shared experience. John and Ayana worked together seamlessly, their actions complementing each other. They began to anticipate one another's needs, a silent understanding developing in the tasks of daily life. Whether it was preparing food, tending to animals, or repairing equipment, there was a sense of harmony, a feeling that they were becoming not just friends, but partners in the truest sense. Yet, amid these moments of joy and connection, there were also challenges. Both John and Ayana had to navigate the delicate balance between personal feelings and cultural expectations. They were aware that the elders, while respectful and wise, watched closely, measuring the sincerity and thoughtfulness of John's actions. Ayana, too, carried her own responsibilities and respect for tradition, ensuring that she approached their growing bond with patience and care. These considerations added a depth to their relationship, making every gesture, every word, and every shared experience meaningful and intentional. One afternoon, after a long day of tending the cattle, John and Ayana sat on a hill overlooking the ranch. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. They watched in silence, appreciating the beauty of the desert and the peacefulness of the moment. John finally spoke, his voice thoughtful. Ayana, I don't know what the future holds. I know tradition has expectations, and I know there are responsibilities we must consider, but I do know that I want to face them with you, whatever comes. Ayana turned to him, her eyes calm but full of emotion. And I want to face them with you, she replied. Not because we must, but because we choose to. The trust and understanding between them deepened further as they continued to share daily life. Each act, from the smallest chore to the quiet conversations at night, strengthened their bond. John began to realize that the connection he felt for Ayana was no longer solely about gratitude or responsibility. It was about admiration, respect, and a genuine desire to walk alongside her in life. Likewise, Ayana saw that John's feelings were sincere, rooted not in obligation but in care and integrity. As the weeks continued, John and Ayana began to imagine a future together. They discussed possibilities, hopes, and dreams, always mindful of the traditions that guided her people. They laughed together, shared quiet moments of reflection, and faced small challenges with teamwork and understanding. The bond that had begun in a life-saving act had grown into something rich, nuanced, and deeply meaningful, a partnership built not just on circumstance, but on choice, trust, and shared values. By the end of this chapter in their lives, John realized that what mattered most was the connection they had formed. Tradition, responsibility, and expectation were important, yes, but the choices they made together, honest, respectful, and heartfelt, were what truly defined their path. Ayana, too, understood that their relationship was a partnership, one that honored her culture while embracing the freedom to choose, to grow, and to face the future together. The desert was calm and quiet that morning, the sun rising slowly over the rugged hills and casting golden glow over the ranch. John Miller stood outside, breathing in the crisp air, feeling the familiar rhythm of life around him. The cattle grazing peacefully, the wind rustling through the sparse trees, and the distant sound of the river flowing steadily. He had spent weeks reflecting on what the elders had told him, on the expectations of Ayana's people, and on the responsibilities that had arisen from the simple act of saving a life. Now, he felt ready to face the most important decision of his life. Ayana joined him quietly, her presence calm and steady as always. She had grown more confident on the ranch, her movements deliberate, her hands sure as she assisted with chores and managed the animals. John looked at her and realized how much she had adapted, how much she had become a part of this world without losing her own identity or spirit. He admired her courage and independence, and he knew that whatever path they chose together would need to honor both her culture and her autonomy. "John," Iana said softly, breaking the morning silence, "have you thought about what you want to do?" Her question was gentle yet serious, a reminder that the time to act had come. John nodded, taking a deep breath. "Yes, Iana. I've thought about it every day since we visited your community. I want to do what's right, not just for me, not just for you, but for your people and for the respect of their traditions. I want to honor everything that has brought us here, while also making sure this is something we both choose." Iana's eyes reflected a mixture of relief and hope. "Then we can face it together," she said. The decision required careful planning and discussion with the elders. John and Iana rode to the Apache community that afternoon, their horses moving steadily along the dusty trails. The elders were waiting, observing their arrival with calm but watchful eyes. John dismounted and approached the group with respect. "I've thought about what you told me," he said. "I understand the bond that has been created. I also understand the responsibilities and expectations that come with it. I want to honor those traditions fully, but I want to do so in a way that respects Iana's choice and our connection." The elders listened carefully, nodding as John spoke. The eldest woman, whose wisdom had guided much of their previous conversations, stepped forward. "Your words show understanding and respect," she said. "You have not only saved Iana's life, but you have also acted with thoughtfulness, patience, and integrity. These qualities are essential, but you must both be certain in your hearts. Tradition guides us, but the bond must be willingly embraced by those involved." John and Iana exchanged a glance. There was understanding in their eyes, a shared commitment to proceed with honesty and care. Over the next few days, they held conversations with the elders and with each other, discussing the responsibilities, expectations, and practical matters of their union. John wanted to ensure that he could meet both the cultural expectations and the practical needs of life on the ranch. Iana wanted to make sure her people's values were respected, while also honoring her own wishes. These discussions were not easy, but they were filled with honesty, respect, and mutual understanding. Every question asked, every concern raised, was addressed with patience and clarity. Through these discussions, John learned more about the traditions that had guided Iana's community for generations. He discovered the rituals that marked important life events, the ceremonies that honored connection and responsibility, and the values that underpinned daily life. Each lesson deepened his respect for her culture and strengthened his commitment to honor it. He also realized that the elders were not imposing these traditions to control him. They were guiding him, offering wisdom and insight so that any decision would be thoughtful and sincere. Meanwhile, John and Iana continued to work together on the ranch, their partnership growing stronger with each shared task. They repaired fences, tended the cattle, and managed the daily chores, their coordination seamless. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire or on the porch, talking about hopes for the future, dreams they had not shared with anyone else, and the lives they envisioned together. These quiet moments were filled with warmth, trust, and growing affection, forming a foundation that was more than just the result of tradition. It was genuine and heartfelt. One afternoon, after a long day of work, John and Iana rode together to a hill that overlooked the ranch and the desert beyond. The sky was painted in hues of orange and pink, and the wind carried the scent of dry earth and wildflowers. They sat quietly, taking in the beauty of the moment. John turned to Iana, his voice gentle but firm. "I know tradition has guided us here, but I want you to know that my choice is my own. I want to face the future with you because I respect you, care for you, and value the life we share. This is not just about duty, it's about us." Iana's eyes shone with emotion. "And I choose the same, John," she replied. Because it is not tradition alone that matters, it is the heart and intention behind it. The elders, observing from the community, recognized the sincerity in their words and actions. They prepared a small ceremony to honor the bond that had formed between John and Ayanna, one that celebrated both the traditions of the Apache people and the respect that John had shown. The ceremony was simple yet profound, held in a place where the desert met the hills, with the sun shining down on the land that had witnessed the beginnings of this journey. Friends, family, and community members gathered, their faces reflecting joy, respect, and approval. During the ceremony, John and Ayanna expressed their mutual respect and commitment. They spoke of their journey, the rescue, the learning, the shared experiences on the ranch, and the understanding that had grown between them. Each word was spoken with sincerity, reflecting not only the traditions being honored, but also the choices they had made together. The elders blessed their union, acknowledging the courage, patience, and integrity that had brought them to this moment. The ceremony was a celebration not only of connection, but of respect, love, and partnership. After the ceremony, John and Ayanna returned to the ranch, their bond stronger and their commitment clear. Life continued with its daily rhythms, but now there was a deeper sense of purpose and joy. They worked together, laughed together, and planned for the future, knowing that they were facing it not only as individuals but as partners. Their relationship was built on more than tradition. It was built on trust, understanding, and a shared vision for life. As the weeks turned into months, John and Ayanna began to make plans for the future of the ranch. They discussed improvements to the land, ways to care for the cattle, and ways to honor both the Apache traditions and the practical needs of ranch life. Ayanna shared her knowledge of sustainable land practices and community values, while John applied his experience and skills. Together, they created a balance between heritage and practicality, tradition and choice, care and independence. Evenings were often spent together, sharing stories, laughter, and quiet reflection. John had never imagined that a chance encounter in the desert would lead to such a profound connection. Ayanna, too, reflected on the journey that had begun with danger and uncertainty, only to grow into trust, understanding, and love. They had faced challenges, navigated expectations, and made thoughtful choices, and now their lives were intertwined in a way that honored both culture and heart. One night under a sky filled with countless stars, John and Ayanna sat by the river, the water reflecting the moonlight. John took Ayanna's hand gently in his. "We've come a long way," he said quietly, "from the creek where I found you to this moment. I promise to honor you, your people, and the life we share together, not because I must, but because I choose to." Ayanna smiled, her eyes bright with trust and love. "And I promise the same," she replied. "We have a future together, one built on respect, care, and choice. That is the true bond we share." In the days and years that followed, John and Ayanna worked side by side on the ranch, their lives intertwined in harmony with the land and their communities. They honored the traditions of the Apache people while embracing the freedom to choose their own path. Their bond, forged through courage, respect, and mutual understanding, became a symbol of connection, resilience, and love. What had begun as a rescue had grown into a partnership, a shared life, and a story that would be remembered by both their families and their communities. John often thought back to the day he had rescued Ayanna from the creek. What had seemed like a simple act of kindness had set in motion a journey far greater than he could have imagined. It had brought him trust, friendship, respect, and love, things that could not be measured, only felt and nurtured. And as he looked at Ayanna, working alongside him with grace, intelligence, and courage, he knew that the bond they shared was not just about tradition. It was about choice, heart, and a life built together. The ranch thrived under their care, the cattle healthy and strong, the land tended with wisdom and care. John and Ayanna continued to learn from each other, to teach and inspire, and to honor the values that had guided them from the very beginning. The story of their bond became one of hope, courage, and respect, a true testament to the power of connection, understanding, and the choices that shape a life shared in trust and love.